So
Yeah,
Ian Fleming approach to podcast start.
yeah. No, it's funny, right? If you think about it, right? James Bond movies always start at the end or at the climax of his last mission. It's kind of Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl. He always talks about how a lot of his songs, or Aerosmith, they start their songs with the chorus. Why do they
Yeah.
do that, right? Because it has the like the climax of a story or the chorus of a song instantly capture the attention. The idea is that they're chord structures or they are moments in time that our brain instantly go to, I need to pay attention.
Interesting. I like that. The hook is right there.
It's right there front and center. Like think of any Aerosmith song you've ever heard. It literally starts off with the title of the song.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. So we've got Kyle Christensen here. We were just talking about James Bond. Like, I gotta get this as part of the podcast. This is this is good stuff because I love James Bond.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like where business is going, and this has kind of been the theme of this year. So we talk about like how our business development working, what are the flaws to it, and Kyle came up with this great idea of what does success look like? What is the perspective of success? And so, Kyle, I'm trying to figure out where you come from. Like, what should my listeners know about you a little bit before we get back to our conversation?
Yeah. I mean, high level, I've been a turnaround guy for the last 2 decades. Basically, businesses, stores, anything that has had a need to achieve success, whatever that definition looks like. And how do we get there with the least amount of expenses or investment? Right. So a lot of strategy, a lot of operations, a lot of 2, 3, 4x growth, and really being able to also do it in a way where you don't kill everybody in the process.
But if you work harder, you're more successful, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Work harder, work smarter, right? That's exactly how the saying goes. For those that know me, I have a giant bald spot on the back of my head, which was a cortisol response to stress, created alopecia. It's an autoimmune disorder
Huh.
because I had to learn sometimes the hard way of what unstrategic fast growth can do.
I think a lot of people in IT understand the concept of burnout way too well. And if you haven't learned that, those are the people that are completely bald. Um, but I hear so often that businesses think if I just put the time in, I will succeed. And
And
I
I
feel
think
like
there
that
is some
fits really
validity
well
to
into what
that.
we're talking about today.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think that ever goes away, right? I don't think effort or work true. I mean, it's called work for a reason, right? I mean, I think there's aspirations to where you will make money doing nothing, and a lot of us won't get there. But there's now also the aspect of work smarter, not harder. I also have some fears, man. And let me kind of walk through like where my fears come from. And it really, right, if we think about the last 3 years, right, we had COVID. So it was kind of like a giant reset. Some businesses prospered, some didn't, right? Some of them had to change, pivot, right? They had to kind of change their flow, which caused last year to be the year of great resignation, right? A lot of us had to go through recruitment and had to go hire new employees, or we had to pay employees more to keep them, like a record amount, which also caused kind of this great uh, kind of business strategy pivot. And now we're headed to a possibly an economic downturn. And you're hearing a lot of things already about burnout. You're hearing a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome. You're hearing a lot of people talk about these states of mind where we are beat up. Yet some of the financial analysis on, especially with some of the clients I work with, they're actually doing pretty good from a financial perspective. And I think that's where the whole idea of talking about today about kind of what is success and how do I keep that front of mind, and the James Bond conversation kind of came up in my brain, and where a lot of my clients I've been talking this year, especially building their strategies and business plans for this year.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think, you had hit upon a couple things that were really cool, which was we tend to compare ourselves against other people's success. And yeah, that bugs me. I've always kind of subscribed to the idealistic, who does Apple compete with? If you look at great companies, thought leaders out there, who are they competing with? And for better or worse, there are companies out there who compete with themselves. They say, I am trying to deliver this perspective, this idea, this thing, and I will be successful when people understand what we are doing. Like, if Apple wanted to compete with um, the current paradigm, which was BlackBerry in handhelds, they would have created another BlackBerry handheld that was just cooler and it was the Apple style. They probably add a little color to it and some style. But instead, they say, we know that we want to behave like this. We tried it in the 90s. It didn't really stick, but we're going to try it again now. And we want this to be the thing we deliver to people. And they were laughed at first, like that's not a real smartphone. That's not a real device. And then they crushed the market because they didn't compete. They instead decided who they were, where they were going. They're going to put, was it 10,000 songs in your pocket? And they're going to put it at an affordable price. And they're going to do it their way. They could have designed another Palm Pilot. They could design another BlackBerry. Because if you look at all the PDAs at the time, they're all trying to be Palm Pilots, just a little bit better. Not
Windows
Apple.
Mobile.
Apple did something completely different.
Well,
And
and if you
so
look
I
at
liked that.
no, and if you look at the vision statement for Apple, they talk about enhancing the lifestyle of their clients. They don't talk about technology. They don't talk about, the how that they're going to do it. They talk about at the end of the day, we are going to enhance your life through technology or the experience in right what we can be in our own efficiencies. And, if we rewind just a tad on that thought, a lot of times when I start working with my clients and we start talking about what the goals of your company are, right? We don't want to start, I want to start with them very first and foremost of what are your own personal goals? Because if you're a business owner, you own 100% of it, 90%, 80% of it. We can't ignore that our business should net us a return. I mean, firsthand, man. The first couple of years you have your business, you usually don't take a paycheck, right? That investment of your time should have an ROI, right? If I don't take a paycheck. And by not thinking of my time should have an ROI, we devalue ourselves and are immediately hitting ourselves in a way that could negatively affect our self-esteem. So, right, we need to understand, what do I need to get out of this, right? If I value myself at $200,000 a year and I don't take a paycheck for 2 years, I should at least get $400,000 when I exit the business.
Yeah, 400 equity right there.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
constantly doing that math in my head.
No, exactly, right? It should be written down, or you should have some way of adding a debt measurement to what I've invested. And it should go up, right? As you become a better CEO, your value and your time is worth more.
Yeah, when I first started looking into starting a business around 2005 or so, I thought, I am a really good engineer. I could do this outsourced and I could make serious money. Unfortunately, Adam Walter has a fairly financial head and is fairly good at math. So when I looked at the time investment and how much I could earn in a corporate world versus how much I could earn as a consultant, it was a break even if I could find two other engineers stupid enough to do it with me. And so I could not make it work in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so I went to the corporate world and I did really well for myself. And then in 2017, I said, okay, I'm in a place now. I can do this. And the ROI would be worth it. And so I that's what I did. And I was able to go without a paycheck for 2 years and not reduce my standard of living. And it gave me the freedom to make some wise choices because I was able to say, okay, I'm going to give myself 5 years runway here, 3 at minimum, to have a direction and a purpose to the business where it is growing. And it end up going in a direction I completely would not have gone if I didn't have that freedom. And largely that is due to being married to a wonderful woman and pharmacist who makes decent cash and us having a fair amount of savings from me working in the corporate world for so long. And
Yeah, we have
because
our
of
own
that,
operational cash flow, right?
yes, I was able to finance a lot of this myself and make wise decisions based upon that and take advantage of opportunities such as buying managed services platform because I had the cash available to do some things that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I thought, okay, if I buy this, I should get a multiplier of this, and that was going to help me get to my goal of that. And I'm able to do these equations in my head and make these simple decisions based upon forecasting where is the industry going and what does it need. because like we're trying to be a little bit more idealistic. I'm trying to solve a problem and enhance. I see what I did as an engineer, and I see the tool that I wish I had that would have made my life better and made my employer's life better. And I think that's what I'm building now. And if this gets delivered to the world, then it's going to make all of our engineers and all these account managers' lives so much better. And it's going to make all these small businesses better because now they're all working together. And that was kind of my thought. But unfortunately, when we go into and we talk to these small businesses, their number one question when they're trying to decide what their KPIs are, what's everybody else doing?
And I'm getting there, right? Because, and I kind of want to just stay on this track, and I promise to come back to that right there. You said an interesting thing, which is freedom. So Dan Sullivan, a very famous business strategy coach, there's 3 pillars to freedom. First is freedom of cash. We have to find a way, because money is the great motivator, right? It's the great thing that is always going to be our excuse. Before we can become a true leader and we can really own our craft and own what we want from our own selves, we have to get to a layer where we can break beyond the economic stronghold. That, right? There's no way of getting around that. The second that he outlines is freedom of time. It becomes the next big excuse that we have as entrepreneurs, where if I cannot break, right, I have enough money, but now I need the way to think of my time as my next most valuable resource. And whatever next motivation level that I need to go through, I got to get away from that excuse of I don't have the time to do that. So he talks a lot about a concept called who, not how, to think about problem solving in terms of who is going to do it, not how are we going to do it. And then that is what leads less to the freedom of choice. And this is where sometimes you'll hear fuck you money, right? Fuck you
Mm-hmm.
money is a concept of I don't care because I'm not cash strong and I'm not time strong, which means I am going to make the choices that I want to make because I have created either my own brand, my own confidence, my own desire, or I know what I want, right? Like the Apple example, they know what they want to do and they don't give a shit if it's going to cost them money or time because they got plenty of it, right? And it's how do I value and spend my money and my time to get myself to that freedom of choice. Now, why this flies into your whole thing about comps, right? What is everyone else doing? Why can't I just go into Reddit or Facebook or Slack, MSP Geek, and say, what are you charging? And I love that whenever I have these calls with my clients, or especially in the early days of working with me when they don't know me too well, right? Is they always want to jump into the what should I charge? How much should I make? You know, what services should I sell? What endpoints should I use? What RMM should I use?
Because those are
Right?
business decisions, and they're
They
not used
keep
to
talking
making
about
them.
cost, right? At the end of the day, they're talking about all these things that cost them money. That doesn't get you freedom of money. That doesn't get you freedom of time. That does not get you freedom of capacity. So you as an entrepreneur are already trying to hyper focus on things that literally get you not a single net gain into your fulfillment as a business owner.
Yeah, we've been using that narrative a lot lately. I like that you're saying this. Is that we have narrowed it down to a phrase. We're here not to save you money. We're here to make you money. And you got to change into that mindset. You are not here to save money. You are here to make money. If you're in a game, because if you say you're here to save money, you're going to be in that cost bid war your entire career. But if you're
Oh,
here
you're
to
going to be
make
spending so
money,
much time trying to save a dollar where if you take that effort and apply it towards making a dollar, you're just going to multiply on your returns.
yeah,
And here's another concept too, is I talk to a lot of my clients as well with the strategy. I ask them 2 questions really to qualify them. The very first question I ask is, are you working the plan? Which obviously 9 times out of 10 is what plan? The second is, can your business manage itself? And then the third is, can your business grow by itself?
yeah.
It's those
And that's
last 2 that I have to strategize for freedom of time and freedom of choice.
and I think that's why technology specialists have such a hard time with this. It's because they're so used to doing that they're not really great at delegating. They don't know they want it to be done the way they want to be done and how they want to be done. They're not okay with letting somebody else do it not as good as they can.
Mm-hmm.
so that they can be free to do something even better.
Oh,
And,
it's the entire Michael Gerber E Myth Revisited book, right? The whole idea that it's a practitioner that says I'm going to share my craft with the world as a way to own my own business. Ultimately, we do it for freedom of money and freedom of time, right? I don't want to make someone else money. I want to own my own schedule. I don't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore, right? A lot of our passions are in that vein. However, what is the one thing that an IT professional, a legal professional, finance professional, a right, all these professional services, what's the one thing that we don't know how to do? Run a business. But what we try to do is fix our business problems with our skill set. So what does a IT provider do? They try to use technical tools to fix their business problems, their behavioral problems, their vision problems. Now, Gerber wrote this in the 70s, right? So he's talking about
yes,
CPAs, he's talking about
people are
HR
people.
firms. He's talking about like very mature lines of businesses,
Yes.
right? They've been around for 100 plus years. The IT space has only been around fractionally since what, 2000, 2001 from an actual IT services
From an actual
perspective?
professional standpoint.
Yeah.
And even right now in 2023, we are just now getting senior level IT professionals.
Yeah.
We are just now, because the IT degrees and the IT ecosystem didn't exist in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was it was the Wild West back then, people. We had IT professionals from the 80s, but they were extremely rare. But
Well, and
now
if they were
we
so
had this flood
hyper
come out of that .com.
well, and they were so hyper specialized, right? I'm a Lotus guy, I'm an Exchange guy, I'm a Cisco guy.
Well, even in the 90s, there wasn't too much specialization because, well,
Oh, mainframe guys and Lotus guys
the
and
mainframe guys, yeah, the AS400s, those guys, like they didn't know how to operate a Windows machine,
no.
but nowadays we have these people that came out of that .com and have failed and succeeded and tried different things. And now they're 20 years, 30 years into their career. We finally have a field that is mature and is learning business principles for the first time.
Well, we're finally learning what our place is in a way. I think there's been a lot of I don't want to say I don't know if it's ignorance or there's a lot of self-actualization that we're having as an industry where at the end of the day we are an expense from a business economics perspective. Anytime a business has an expense, I need to have an ROI on it. And I'm budgeted very firmly on what I can do to operate the greater good, which is the business. I
Yep.
do an exercise a lot of times with my clients where I teach like the service manager or the engineers how to read a P&L. And I do this, and I'm even doing this at MSP GeekCon, quick plug, right? I'm speaking there. It's in May. It's a fantastic event. But part of it is when you start to outline all the levels of a P&L, right? I talk about in an MSP, you live in COGS, right? You are a part of the service, which means that every hour you get paid is inventory to be resold to customers. That's the true reason why utilization is so important. However, for your clients, you are an expense, which means two things. One, my client should have efficiency built off of that investment or an ROI. And two, if they are going to hire or outsource IT, I need to come in lower than what the budget is for other options like actually hiring internal IT. That is where we
You're a
live.
janitor at that point.
We are a janitor. And why is that a bad thing? Because we
Because
should
you
be
should,
making COGS more efficient, systems more efficient, communications more efficient. We are actually operations.
it is part of what we do, but then there's another layer on top of that. We actually have a really great illustration of the janitorial engineer versus the janitor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into like a hospital and you go to custodial engineers, those guys are the sharpest rocks you're
Mm-hmm.
going to see. They are sitting there designing out HVAC systems that are going to keep the air clean for patients. Like these are very, very smart, capable people. They are not the broom pusher that you would think of in terms of a janitor. So they're solving very complex problems and making the hospital better and helping the hospital meet their goals in better ways. There's always this chief engineer that's sitting there as a custodian. And yeah, technically he's a janitor. But at the same time, when they're sitting around the board trying to design out the building and figure out what's going to help patients the best, he's sitting at the table helping them figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just waiting for them to build the building to clean it. He's there as part of the discussion. And engineers have moved from being part of the discussion of, hey, we need a website to sell cars so that we can, like, remember 2000, the dot-com bubble, it was all about car sales on the webs. That was huge. How
Mhm.
do we move inventory through a website faster? Oh, we hire this person to come in and design this weird application that everybody can see, and this thing called the World Wide Web. Now people can see our inventory from the comfort of their home, and then they come in and they buy.
Mhm.
And so we solved a business problem there. And when you see engineers, even a tier one tech, come in and you say, hey, we're having this problem. We don't know how to live stream our dogs when they're having playtime in the kennels. Oh, did you know that there's, and then the tier one tech who geeks out about this stuff reads up on all these thousands of articles and he knows 50 different live stream solutions in his head, goes, oh, we could easily set that up. That tier one tech in that moment is a C-level officer. They're solving business problems and helping the client. Unfortunately, we are so busy fixing and break fixing that we don't have time to have C-level conversations. And that's what happens when an IT person starts running their own business. They're so busy fixing servers and fixing PCs that it doesn't occur to them that P&L is important day one,
Well,
not day
it's
50.
right, and that's where, right, when I said the two things that if we're an expense for our clients, the two things that are important is not just the custodial aspect, but the ROI aspect,
Yeah.
right? How do I make if I am a cog to revenue type of ratio for my business, right? A gross margin is what we're it's commonly referred to, right? I should be able to find a way to increase my gross margin through, like you mentioned, productivity or through some level of we can make marketing cheaper because of this tool, right? Now we're actually improving net margin if we were to talk about it fiscally.
Yeah.
And
And
where your point of understanding the P&L becomes important and really understanding the economics of an IT services provider, going full circle back to the beginning of the conversation with comparables and setting goals. Not only do I need to understand my goals for myself, I need to understand how my business also fulfills the goals of the company, or the company fulfills the goals of myself, but also the goals of the team that's working
yeah.
for the company.
And you
And
had
that's what
mentioned
gets
something.
tricky.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned something when we first started, when we were prepping for this conversation, is cortisol overwhelming our brain, which paralyzes us. We like to go back to the familiar. So when you're afraid, like when Adam Walter's having a really bad week, I told my kids this all the time. Depending on the level of video game or show I'm watching, you can tell how stressed I am. If I'm playing something brand new that I've never played before, I'm feeling pretty relaxed in life. If I go back to like Zelda Ocarina of Time, I had a pretty rough week. I want something that reminds me of a better time in life. If they ever see me playing Mario Brothers 1 nonstop, dad needs a serious hug. Because we go back to the familiar when cortisol floods our brains. We want to go back to comforting. And so these IT professionals who are running businesses go back to the thing they know rather than the thing that is going to help their company and help their client, because that stuff's hard. And that stuff's complicated, and we're not used to doing that. I would rather redesign BGP routes. I would rather go in to do this insanely complicated stuff that I'm familiar with than sit down and think, how do I drive profits for my client using the cogs I have?
Okay,
And I
this
think,
is I love this, man. I
yeah, so
love
I just
this.
wanted to wrap up like here really quick. I want you to wrap up, and we're going to talk in the next episode about how do we solve this problem
Mhm.
of fear.
Yep,
So set
and it's
us
going to
up
take me a
for
little bit,
wrapping
man.
up this problem, and then we're going to move into how do we solve it.
And I love the metaphor with the video games because my brain literally just now I have the straight road shot. So rewinding just a tad, right? We set our goals, right? We figure it out. We figure out we want to get to this point in the business because it gets me my own economic and philosophic success. Well, part of that is you're going to have to do work. And doing that work now creates a interesting circumstance because I know that chances are this pinnacle that I am trying to achieve is going to be difficult. right? It's going to mean new revenue, new employees, new trust, new vulnerability, all that stuff. Now, to do a quick segue to explain cortisol a little bit. So, for the last 30, 40 years, there's this idea of what is consciousness. And I'm going to get a little psychological on you guys here. And what was commonly believed in the psychological world was perspective and cognition, the ability to think and to remember, was really a human trait being and some animalistic trait because we could remember the past. However, in the last 5, 10 years, there's been this idea that it's actually not the ability to remember the past because a lot of animals have instinct, and instinct is a function of being able to develop reactions, which is a past level of going forward. And there's some very simple creatures and single-celled organisms that have that ability to react. What they now think is that it's the ability to think forward. The ability to truly be a cognitive being is that I can perceive and think about the future. And what's interesting about thinking about the future is it causes a response in us to have stress, have anxiety, have the ability to think about what do I need to prepare for? What do I need to predict? And it could be something as simple as a game of chess, only one move. Or it could be something as complex as how do I get my business to 3, 4, 5x the scale? Now, in that, you are going to create stressors. And stressors, from a biological perspective, is a chemical called cortisol that gets released in your brain. So the more cortisol, the more stressed and anxious I am. Now, the reason we have that response is a fight or flight response, which is, lions chasing me. I need to have my blood pressure, my brain, something needs to tell me to fucking move, right? Get going or you're going to get eaten by this lion. Now, what happens though with a cortisol response is it does cause, on the negative side effect, that ability to go, can I run fast enough? Can I hire fast enough? Can I get through this problem? So we as people need to learn how to handle a cortisol effect, right? So, and I don't know if, Adam, if I'm getting too off the rails, please correct me here. Now, in that, and how do we apply this to business, is the risks and the growth that we need to achieve directly correlates to how much cortisol or anxiety or stress we are going to be able to sustain. Now, if I am that IT guy that literally just wants to sit there and fix computers because that's the service that I know how to provide, I am now, from a biological perspective, trying to minimize how much cortisol that I allow into me because I can only sustain so much stress. And that level of stress that I can sustain directly correlates with, in my free time, I'd rather play Mario because it doesn't require any cortisol to be produced because it will help me maintain or slowly diminish now how much cortisol I have in me.
Yeah.
Where if I play a game, if I'm already peaked because the day has been stressful and I had a client tell me no or fire me or an employee was a pain in my ass, if I go play a real stressful game that causes more cortisol, I am now going beyond my limits.
Yeah.
Now, why this is important, and this is similar for any type of neurotransmitter or chemical reaction we have in us, like dopamine or serotonin or any of these other things, because if I am now going down this path of I want to grow and scale my business, I have to work on the ability to sustain more stress and anxiety, and I use it as a way to motivate myself, not as a way to limit myself. So just like going to the gym, I hate to say it, same with some neurotropic drugs like cocaine. If I'm able to sustain more cortisol for longer, I am now willing to take more risks often, which means I'm going to be able to hit more goals more often because I am now not risk adverse, but I'm using it to motivate myself.
Yeah. And I think that's the core of the problem is that we use that fear and then we don't leverage it appropriately. And that's what I'm going to cover in our next episode is we have this fear and it keeps us from setting appropriate goals and finding success in a way that is meaningful. But there is a way to digest that cortisol and move forward and use it to motivate yourself. And in part 2 of this episode, we're going to talk about that. So I thank you for coming on today, Kyle.
No problem.
And we'll see you next week.
I appreciate it.